Hi, and welcome to an exploration of Analytical Method number 9, seeking difference within similarity and similarity within difference. Alright, now you're probably really familiar with comparing and contrasting things and figuring out what the similarities and what the differences are. But there are better ways to do this and worse ways to do this. If you just kind of list similarities or list differences, then, well, you've maybe completed assignment, you've shown you've done a reading, but you haven't really created useful knowledge. It's just kind of a little boring little shopping list. And the thing about comparing and contrasting is that it isn't an end in itself. It needs to be kind of part of an ongoing process that maybe contributes to a broader understanding of things. So in order to take comparing and contrasting and make it actually a useful generator of knowledge, you kind of need to have context. You need to see how similarities and differences are related to each other and to the things you're trying to explain. This idea works as well in the natural sciences. If you think about, say, a chemistry experiment, and you're trying to figure out the similarities and differences, and you pointed to one, bubbling cauldron and said, well, that substance is blue, and to the other cauldron and said that substance is red. There, I found a difference. Well, that's not useful. What you would need to do is put those different colors in the context of some similarity, so that would kind of open up areas for you to explore to figure out why they ended up that way. So if you added ammonia, say a similarity between the two cauldrons would be that you added ammonia to both of them, and one of them it turned red and one of them it turned blue, then you're embedding this difference within a similarity that creates it kind of creates an area of friction between the two objects that you can then explore. So when we're doing this in history, let's look at an example. All right, thinking of World War I, you could point to both France and the U.S. being nationalistic in 1914. So that's a similarity between the two, and it's significant. Again, you want to ground things in their context. It's significant because as democracies, public opinion probably had a good deal of influence on the war and peace policies of both countries. Okay, but within that context of that similarity, what's the difference? Well, okay, the obvious one is France went to war in 1914 and the U.S. didn't. So what's important about this difference? Why is it significant to us? When we relate the idea back to the similarity we started with, maybe it has to do with the fact that there might have been different types of nationalism in France and in the U.S. And so then this gives us a lot of friction to explore. And in fact, we might find that French nationalism was very anti-German directed, and it was constant, and the public in France was at a steady state of being ready to go to war with Germany if the possibility arose. Whereas in the U.S., the nationalism was there, but it wasn't always bubbling on the surface, although it could appear in certain circumstances, like when you think of the Spanish-American War in 1898. So maybe there's something to this idea of different types of nationalism popping up in somewhat similar societies that then led to different results, going to war or not going to war. Okay, now obviously, when you look at France, there are other things that drag France into war. It's alliance system, its closeness to Germany, the fact that Germany actually was the first to strike on the Western Front. But that said, France did not take the steps that it could have taken to avoid war with Germany in 1914. Germany was offering some options in order to forestall war between Germany and France that France didn't take. And at the same time, with the U.S., all right, distance is clearly keeping the U.S. out of the war, and to some extent. But you look a little later, 1915, with the sinking of the Lusitania. The U.S. could have gotten into the war at that point. Could have, fairly easily done so. But the U.S. did not. And not only did the U.S. stay out of the war, but staying out of the war was popular enough among the public that Wilson ran for re-election successfully in 1916 on the slogan that he kept us out of war. All right, so there may well be something really important about this different type of nationalism, and it opens up other questions for us. It opens up questions about, all right, why maybe did different types of nationalism occur? Why if France was so hostile towards Germany, why was there no war for decades and decades after the Franco-Prussian War in 1870, 1871? It opens up the idea of, well, all right, if the American public's nationalism could spring open at things like the explosion of the USS Maine or the sinking of the Lusitania, why was the government or the press able to bottle that back up in some cases and not in others? So this is what we mean when I say that, like, putting these similarities and differences in context with each other. It does open up a lot of areas for exploration that will help you understand whatever it is you're trying to understand a lot better than if you're simply making a list of, all right, France went to war, the U.S. did not. France was nationalistic, and so was the U.S. There's not a lot of, when you don't plant these in context with each other, there's not a lot of, it doesn't point you outward towards more questions. All right, now in the same idea, we look for unexpected similarities within a difference. So you could look to the idea that the U.S. that American and Russian society were polar opposites during the war. The U.S. was open, vibrant, and democratic and tolerant. Russian society was closed, aristocratic, stagnant. But despite that difference, they both reacted the same way in some ways towards their ethnic German minorities. In both countries, the ethnic German minorities were persecuted during the war. So, considering that difference within the similarity, it also creates kind of a friction that you can look into. Like, all right, considering that you're coming from two different places, why is it that both societies ended up in the same place vis-a-vis their German population? And now that can open up questions about human nature. Maybe people just really need a scapegoat and seek them out, and will punish an ethnically different scapegoat. It opens up questions about the nature of total war, like not only moral questions, but also questions about, well, how and why do populations turn on their own in the context of a total war? And that opens up the idea of exploring this across different wars and across different types of wars. Even maybe in some types of wars, civil wars or guerrilla wars, there's even more persecution of ethnic minorities. Like all of these are opened up by this activity. You could even go a step deeper into the rabbit hole if you wanted and look at the persecution of ethnic Germans in the U.S. and that in Russia, and perhaps you might notice that they're motivated by different factors, and then you could kind of explore those different factors, which would take you to a difference within a similarity within a difference. Point is, both of these kind of mirror activities, looking for difference within similarity and similarity within difference, are very useful because they help you tease out the relationships. They help you open up and to some extent comment on a lot of the why questions. Why do these things occur? It's in some ways also like the natural experiments that we do when we're looking for counterfactuals. We change when we're using counterfactuals. We change one variable in a historical experiment and see how it changes the results of that experiment. Borrowing approaches from the natural sciences. In Analytical Method number 9, seeking difference within similarity, we kind of do the same thing. We take similar situations, change one detail, only we're not doing a mind experiment this time. This time we're actually looking at history as it occurred, and see how and why that affects things. So all in all, a very potentially useful method. Have a good day.